Hello and welcome to my first ever podcast. Since YouTube made this new feature, I thought I would use it and make my opinion of certain Undertale character stories or alternate universes known to the public. And hey, maybe I meet some like-minded people in the comments. And also, this new feature would really help me since I don't need to edit some extra long videos. But let's just get started with the first topic. And this is Mr. Sexiest Man Alive, sænz from Undertale. Yes, I know, I already made a video, but I really want to say I really don't like this video anymore. It's not up to my standards anymore. And since the podcast feature is now available, I want to remake it. So let's begin. And I will start by saying that sænz is overrated and overused. Yes, I said it. But what do I mean by that? Well, first of all, let's define the word overrated. Overrated means that someone or something is rated or valued too highly. And sænz is both of these things. He is seen as a god-like figure who can do no wrong, and he is forced to be the main protagonist in every Undertale-related story. And every story he is in, he is either a hero, a scientist, or even a god. While in the original game, he was just a sentry guard and a hot dog seller who called you out for being a furry when you order too many hot dogs. The only story I remember where he was just a hot dog seller was in the sweet and wholesome story called Skeleton Kara. But why is he always seen as a scientist? What did he do to become so popular? And why did his popularity become a bad thing? Well, the reason why he is seen as a scientist is because of the fact that he has a book about quantum physics and a secret lab in his garage, as well as his complete genocide fight where he talks about quantum physics. The dialogue were some good stuff, I must say, but this was only a small part of sænz's character. It was in fact so small that Toby Fox never confirmed or outright said that sænz is a scientist. We could only theorize, and this is where the problem eventually started. Since now the fandom crafted a lot of theories. Some were good, like sænz was a scientist, and then there were some really bad ones, like that sænz is the only one who can remember resets. And this is just false. Sure, sænz can remember resets, but so does everyone else. So the fandom completely ignored the fact that every character remembers the reset in some way and form, mostly seen as a deja vu. Asgore is even one of the characters who faced humans with the ability to load and save, and that 6 times. And before you say, oh man, but these 6 humans wouldn't be able to load or save. Well, Flowey was shocked by the fact that we could save multiple times, meaning that either he is referring to his ability to save and load, or taking notes from the human that fell down who could save and load. But that's just a theory. A game theory. But all of this would be completely ignored since the game became super popular. And so the theory also became super popular and became the new headcanon in the mind of fandom. It didn't help that sænz C Megalovania was seen as the best Undertale OST, which isn't the truth, since Undertale and some really talented music maker made some banger Megalovania cover and even generated whole new music genre with Megalovania-like music, where CJ from GTA San Andreas got his own Megalovania. And this music only became, in the eyes of the fandoms, even better when sænz was super depressed or super angry, since the music would differentiate from the normal Megalovania by becoming faster, by becoming slower, or having a higher beat or a higher bass. And so sænz became the most awesomest character in the whole game. And this was already bad enough, but became even worse with the introduction of alternate universes, since this was the moment where Undertale started to become extremely cringy, since most stories were just simple reskins, some edgy fest or lewd fanfiction, and most of these AUs or ULT, aka alternative timelines, were poorly written, where sænz becomes most of the time the main focus, since the fandom loves the plot with sænz being the hardest boss in the game and knowing about timeline, as well as knowing about dodging. All of this resulted into him becoming the hardest enemy in the game. And so sænz became the mascot of Undertale and its many AUs. And all the canon facts about pə-PY-rəs being a puzzle genius who could build complicated puzzles were forgot, as well as Asgore knowing about saves and load. I mean, it's no wonder, since most of the fans never actually played the game, or those who played the game didn't discover the many secrets, or called pə-PY-rəs multiple times to see pə-PY-rəs' coping mechanism that he used to stop being depressed, while also completely forgetting that pə-PY-rəs once on board in one of the many neutral endings to end your life. Speaking of neutral endings, none of them actually cared about the neutral endings, since there were only two endings in the eyes of the fandom. First was the pacifist ending, aka the most boring one, and second was the genocide end, the most edgy and awesome one. Forget the most depressing ending, the neutral end, where many characters lost all hope and dream and were trapped in an empty grave. But some characters roll up to the occasion and became the savior of the underground, like when Undyne became queen or emperor, and she started a rebellion to rebel against the queen's regime, as well as started a personal war against the player. Or pə-PY-rəs' king regime, where he tries everything with the help of his positive demeanor to help everyone around him, and wear a mask to hide that he actually knows that everyone he loves is now dead, just to ensure that sænz would not worry about him. Speaking of sænz, all of these stories would actually help sænz fans, since they could explore more sænz story, where sænz is now faced in a different timeline, where some things are not so bleak like in the genocide timeline, or not so hopeful like in the pacifist time. But now everyone ignores the neutral ending, since the genocide ending are so much cooler. And since most of the newer Undertale fans have never actually played the game, all the facts they would know would only be the fandom headcanon. And later on, the fandom would develop even more headcanon with the help of gacha life and edgy sænz. And so headcanons like pə-PY-rəs is a little bit special, sænz is a god, sænz is super strong, sænz is the strongest monster underground, sænz knows about the reset, sænz is a scientist, sænz is super smart, sænz is this, sænz is that, sænz is that, became the new canon. But the worst one is, in my opinion, that sænz is the strongest character in the game, and is also the only one who can stop the human. And this becomes his only character trait, since the fandom completely ignores the canon interaction with sænz, since none of them, like I mentioned before, played the game. So no one knows that sænz is lazy and is bad at telling jokes, since this is a proof of his laziness. They also forget the fact that he is liked by everyone, and his bad jokes makes everyone's day, and he's always there for the simple folks. The fans also forget that sænz's job is not as a nerd, but as a sentry, as well as a hot dog seller or a snow seller, by giving you some overpriced fried snow, only to reveal that he was just joking and that he never actually wanted our money, since he always pays for our bills by not paying them. Funny. They also forget that sænz and Flowey have a rivalry, since sænz beat up Flowey multiple times, and Flowey was never able to kill sænz, even with the help of loads and save files. And most importantly, they also forget that sænz lets you kill whoever you want. It doesn't stop you, since he somewhat knows that you can just load the timeline. He doesn't feel sadness when you kill his brother. Sure, he is super pissed when you get confronted in the hallways, but he doesn't stop you. Heck, the only thing sænz does is telling you, by the way, you are one sick guy, you know that? And leaves you alone. But since the fandom only knows the fandom genocide run, the only real dialogue there, remember, is the quantum physics talk, as well as the pə-PY-rəs "do you need anything" line. And so the fandom made sænz the tragic hero who wants to stop you from killing everyone because you killed everyone he loves, forgetting that sænz knows way before you fell down about the ability to load and the fact that a crazy person would be able to control the world but would stop when he becomes bored. And he knows in the end the human would become bored and maybe, just maybe, would give monsterkind one day their happy ending. So a story where sænz got his happy ending would be interesting. I mean, Toby Fox wrote an Undertale Christmas special where sænz got his happy ending. It was quite wholesome. pə-PY-rəs even mentioning that sænz seems somewhat happy. But wait, we can't have something wholesome. We need these edgy traits. And these character traits can only be seen and showcased in a genocide run. Meaning, if you want to show that canon side of sænz, you need to write a story of sænz where he is the last monster alive and fight against the human who is most of the time controlled by the evil spirit of Kara. Ooh. And this results into the fandom always telling the same story over and over and over and over and over again, where sænz becomes in every single story edgier and edgier since he remembers, according to the fandom, every single research. Yay, baby! Which results into different storylines, like once again, the most famous one, Dust, sænz, Killer sænz, Horror, or Insanity sænz. All of them are crazy, perverted sociopath who are even worse than Patrick Goatman. Patrick Bateman. And the fandom starts to believe the more edgier, the more mature a story is. And so the fandom completely ignores what maturity really is. Maturity is a collection of experience, becoming mentally balanced and prepared for anything life holds for you. Instead, the fandom wrote grimdark stories where no character has any hope of escaping this endless circle of suffering. But who cares about every other character? The only character who is actually suffering is sænz. And like Dust or Killer, we get bored quite quickly if this story continues to be the same over and over again. A bloodthirsty human comes to the underground and kills everyone over and over and over again until one character snaps. And this is the funny skeleton, and he starts to kill his own kind. If I hear another story like this, I will actually write my own story about sænz. One time, this sænz was so fucked up by all these edgy stories that he actually said, "You know what? Fuck it. I'll stay at home. Quarantine myself. Bye, bitch." And the story would be called sænz. A sænz who stays at home. I can already imagine the interaction with other characters. "Sænz? A bloodthirsty human is around here."
I already know. Anyways, pə-PY-rəs, wanna play some games? Like The Meaning of Life? Oh, or Monopoly. But I warn you, I'm going to take the shoe.
"Sænz, you can't take the shoe unless you pick up your sock."
Oh, by the way, call Undyne over. I want to play some other games.
"Sænz, she's busy fighting the human."
Who cares? Then let's call Alphys over. Maybe she shows us some of her anime. Or what are these hentai things? I don't know.
"Sænz, nobody knows in the underground what these hentai things are."
Well, you're right, pə-PY-rəs. Anyways, let's play Monopoly.
You know what? I need to chill a little bit. So why not? Let's play Monopoly.
Okay, let's go.
And that would be the complete story. Funny, but simple. Unlike the grim dark stories of Killer, Dust, or Horror sænz, where the fandom started to believe that these characters are some broken heroes, some fallen heroes, or some broken men. Which is true, I will not deny that. Everyone who would face such hardship would eventually break down. But for the love of Toby Fox, you can't just ignore all the crime Horror did, as well as say that Undyne is always at fault, not knowing that in the Horrortale comic, many people had a role in why the underground became such a hellhole. Speaking about guilt, since the fans don't want the sænz is seen as a villain, the fans always search for a scapegoat, like Undyne in Horrortale, Nightmare in Murder Tale, or something new, Gaster for Insanity sænz, Ink for whatever reason, or even the player. And while the player is most likely the main reason of why every sænz in existence went insane, since we write these stories, it didn't excuse some of the sænz's action after killing the human or the player, since he continues his murderous rampage. Since in the eye of the fandom, that would make it the most logical step of a man who started killing to stop a killer, to just continue killing. But let me tell you this isn't a mature story. I mean, let's take Rudius from Jobless Reincarnation as an example. His story started from him being a 40-year-old loser who spent his entire life in his room alone jerking off to anime girls until he was kicked out and killed by a truck. He only matured by learning from his mistake and worked his body, mind and magical skills in his new magical world he was reborn in, and only then he overcame his trauma and flaws so that he could build a family and started fighting against a god. While the story has many problems, and I mean many problems, the first volume still holds a special place in my heart, since it was mature and really interesting. Heck, the story even convinced me to go to the gym, as well as another character, Guts from the series Berserk. Guts only became mature by overcoming his emo state by starting to trust people once again, and fought against his burning rage and decided, instead of using children as a meat shield, he would instead protect the branded woman and protect his comrades. Sure, I simplified a lot of Berserk arcs, mainly the Lost Children arc and the coming arcs then. Mostly the Lost Children arc, since I mentioned that Guts uses meat shields. But to my defense, I loved the Lost Children arc. Anyways, as you can see, the above-mentioned stories have themes of maturity, since both characters are learning to become mentally balanced, collecting experience, prepare for anything in life, and, most importantly, have a hopeful message that the reader could learn. And sænz's story can be really mature. I mean, let's take a look at the two archetypes that the fandom most likely writes about. First of all would be sænz is on a murder spree, or sænz is super depressed. How can we make such a story mature? Well, maybe this murderous sænz feels guilt for all the crimes he has committed, and maybe he wants to atone from all his sins that is crawling on his back, and he starts helping other universes, or his own universe in any way he can possibly do. Or maybe a depressed sænz would try something else, would try to find a new hobby that gives his life a new purpose. Let's take Rust for example. Even though Rust isn't a sænz, they are Frisk. But that doesn't matter, because in the end, Rust was a human who was turned into a cyborg or android, I don't know which the terminology they use, who was made to kill the underground. But look at where they are now, protecting Poppy and becoming a sibling figure, while also protecting the universes from certain threats. Chicken's sanity is also a good example, because he found purpose once again by protecting Rose. Inverted Fate sænz is also the best example of how to write a depressed sænz story, because after he accidentally killed Gaster, he tries everything into filling the role of the royal scientist. But he has no clue of what he can actually do, and because of that, he doesn't take care of his brother and spends 24/7 in the royal lab to try to find Gaster once again and break the barrier. But after a long time and after he found nothing, he became depressed and noticed that he would always neglect his brother. So he gave his royal scientist title to another scientist and also taught the scientist all about his knowledge and became the brother Papyrus needed in this hard time. But since both of them needed money, sænz started to get a new job, and that was the job of a royal guardsman. He became even so good that he became even lieutenant and found a new purpose, a purpose where he would gladly die for and would gladly protect anyone who stands against it. But in the end, he wouldn't sacrifice his own morals and would try everything to protect Frisk from any harm, while still making sure to stop Frisk when they step out of line. But please, for the love of God, read Inverted Fate. It's the best AU. Please. But most sænz never get such a mature storyline. It always is the same. Everyone is an idiot and doesn't know about the resets and stands in front of Kara to stop them from destroying the timeline. We don't have a heart-to-heart conversation with Papyrus like in Undertale or the golden pineapple in Inverted Fate. We don't have a story where sænz has to face his past mistake and start choosing between what he has or what he has lost, like in Inverted Fate. We also don't have stories where sænz is faced with a really happy timeline, like in Toby Fox's Christmas special story. Instead, we have grimdark stories where sænz becomes a bigger monster only to fail once again. And worst of all, these stories evolve over and over again, where sænz turns into a multiversal threat that can destroy timelines or even multiverses. I mean, look at Arrow or Ink sænz. Both of them are known for being super sus and super strong, but their origin and story is completely ignored. In fact, every sænz story is ignored, and only the sænz power level is being discussed by the fans, since violence, blood, gore, and power scaling equals, in their eyes, a good story. And because of that, we have stories like Godverse, an AU line that only depicts God's being, while the fandom is debating who is the strongest character and rages whenever someone doesn't agree with them. Listen man, I hate power scaling, okay? I just want a good story. If someone is stronger, I don't care, as long as the story is interesting in any way. But because the fandom doesn't care about good storytelling anymore, they have completely forgotten underdog storylines, completely ignored character development stories, and just focused on grimdark stories. As well as making sure that sænz is super duper strong and can beat even the Scarlet King, or Murphy Law, or Peter Griffin, or even Walter White. And I for one am sick and tired of this, and want to say to every sænz fan out there, to every Undertale fan out there, that you need to stop making sænz the main character. And no, it doesn't count if you put Kara, Frisk, or Gaster as side characters. You need to introduce and also use every single Undertale character that Toby Fox wrote about. Not ignore canon facts and not rely on fandom headcanons. Write an interesting story and don't rely on power scaling. Write a story with meaning and not with epic fights and epic scenes. Because only when you have a meaningful story with a meaningful message, like be open with your problems, can an epic fight scene or an epic scene become epic and the story would be remembered. Okay, this was a lot to talk about, but if you are interested in hearing about canon facts, please check out my whole video about canon Dusttale facts. Also, I am planning on making a complete summary of the Dusttale visual novel. So if you are interested in hearing about this, please like and subscribe to my channel. But anyways, I wish you all a bloody good day and I believe in you, so start believing in yourself. Goodbye.